As America gets set to celebrate its 250th birthday this weekend, the Trump administration is dealing with a number of major issues, from Middle East peace talks to consequential rulings issued by the Supreme Court and scrutiny over the president's finances. For more on this, let's bring in Candice Cole, who joins us now from Washington. So Candice, there's been a lot of conflicting information coming out of the U.S. and Iran in terms of where things currently stand between the two. We know both sides met in Doha this week, so what more can you tell us about that?
Right. Good morning. So today, Iran's chief negotiator, Mohammad Khalibaf, said that if the U.S. and Israel do not fulfill their commitments, then Iran will resume, quote, appropriate measures. So I would presume more strikes on U.S. bases in the region and more fighting between Israel and Hezbollah. But in terms of those talks, we heard from both Pakistan and Qatar. They're both mediators between the two who said that progressive progress was made Wednesday concerning that memorandum of understanding to end the war between the U.S. and Iran that they signed off on last month. Now, the two sides met with mediators separately, so no direct talks yet, but President Trump continues to paint a picture of success. He said Thursday that the denuclearization of Iran is going well, and so were those meetings. But Khalibaf has said they will not move forward with any provisions set forth in that MOU until the current conditions are fulfilled. And also remember that they've already accused the U.S. of violating their end of that agreement, so they're digging their heels into the ground here. Also, Iran's president has said that they're set to receive some $6 billion in frozen oil assets from the Qataris. That hasn't yet been confirmed, but it's even more reason for Iran to believe that they have the upper hand here.
All right, and Candice, also this week, the Supreme Court has been busy. It was wrapping up its last week in session, heading into the July 4th weekend. Now, some of those rulings, a clear rebuke on the Trump administration, and others granting the president outsized power. So tell us about some of those key rulings that came out this week.
Right. So one of the biggest decisions that came down had been one that had many of us here in the state sort of holding our breath. It was the case around birthright citizenship. Now, Tuesday, the Supreme Court decided to uphold birthright citizenship, striking down that executive order that President Trump issued at the start of his term. Chief Justice Roberts writing that the High Court will keep that promise to every freeborn person here in the United States. And again, just to recap, the president wanted to limit birthright citizenship. So in other words, disqualify those who were born to undocumented immigrants and also those here in the country illegally. The other noteworthy decision was around two state laws out of Idaho and West Virginia around banning transgender girls and women from playing in team sports in school. Now, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of those bans, saying that they are neither unconstitutional nor violate the Title IX, which deals with sex-based discrimination in schools. Now, this opens the door for about 12 other states that already have similar laws on the books, but some liberal states like California that allow trans girls to play in team sports in schools say that they intend to keep their law in place despite the Supreme Court's ruling.
All right, and Candice, a lot has come out this week about President Donald Trump's personal finances, sparking concern over potential conflicts of interest and possible constitutional violations. Tell us more about this.
Right. So we learned this week that President Trump earned over $2 billion in revenue last year. That's coming from his public financial disclosure filing for 2025 with the Government Ethics Office. Now, this massive document that's around 1,000 pages shows a good chunk of that money came from his crypto companies, things like meme coins, to the tune of at least $1.2 billion. Other revenue came from other retail sales or things like the Trump watch, the Trump Bible, for example. But the concern here is that unlike past presidents who put their business assets in a blind trust, Trump has his son managing those assets, which could put him in violation of what's called the Emoluments Clause. It basically bars presidents from taking gifts or payments from individuals, states, or foreign countries. So Trump ran into this during his first term over his Trump Hotel in D.C. that was also hosting foreign diplomats, but it's never really been enforced. So there's really a lot of gray area there when it comes to actually trying to find out what the repercussions could be here.
All right, and lastly, Candice, a lot is happening in D.C., of course, with the lead up to America's Independence Day and July 4th celebrations. And one major event happening is this Great American State Fair promoted heavily by President Trump. What can you tell us about it and how visitors are handling it, especially with this heat wave that's consumed much of the U.S. as well as here in Canada?
Right. So that Great American State Fair is just one of President Trump's grand vision for Freedom 250, which is not to be confused with America 250, which is a congressionally chartered initiative that dates back to 2016. So the fair is supposed to feature booths from each state, though some have been empty from states that chose not to send anyone to represent them. And attendance has been pretty modest, especially with the heat, as you just mentioned, which could also be playing more of a role. It's all taking place on the National Mall. And for anyone who's never been here, there is no shade out there whatsoever. It is a huge open space. So there's been a bit of controversy as well, as over half of the musical acts set to perform at the fair pulled out of the event because it wasn't quite the nonpartisan celebration that they were led to believe. There was also a Confederate flag in the North Carolina booth that was put there in response to the state's Democratic governor opting out of sending anyone there due to a lack of funding. That has now sparked a boycott of the Mount Olive Pickle Company by the MAGA crowd after it decided to pull out of the fair because of that Confederate flag being there. So quite a pickle there, pun intended. But according to fair organizers, despite the heat and all of the controversy, there was still some 150,000 people that have shown up so far. So we'll have to wait and see what those numbers look like on the 4th.
All right, that is our Candice Cole joining us from Washington. Thank you, Candice.